Ladies and gentlemen, what a fantastic day to make a video on an F-Type. In a previous comment, we were told that we were the overweight, sloppy, backwards hat-wearing, don't know anything about F-Type. I think we're gonna rock that. So from now on, we will be the sloppy, overweight, backwards hat-wearing car experts, also known as Performance on Wheels, which is a father-son team. And today we're going to present some pretty awesome info for you on the F-Type.
If you are new to the channel, previously we owned a 2015 Jaguar F-Type R. At that same time, we actually compared it to a 2017 R all-wheel drive. So we had a rear-wheel drive, we compared it to an all-wheel drive, and now we have the SVR in the garage. We've had all three of these vehicles up on the lift, and today we're going to lift up the SVR, we're going to take off all of its under panels, and we're going to see what this $130,000 Win-New supercar had to offer.
Now, Austin, this isn't meant to be a buyer's guide. That's actually going to be one of our next upcoming videos.
Yes.
But in this video, there's also going to be some very useful buyer's guide-ish information that we're going to uncover as we look at the underbelly of the SVR, at the same time kind of unpacking what the differences are on the R versus the SVR. And by the end of this video, we're going to have some pretty cool conclusions.
Absolutely, we will.
We're going to start by sharing some of the differences on the SVR versus the R. Then Austin's going to take over from there on what's up next. So the SVR, in summary, like if I were to describe it in a sentence or two, essentially it's a aero and downforce, more of a cosmetic package than it is like full-blown performance or a dramatically different car. But there are some items for the true SVR fans that we're going to show you that are dramatically different, and we'll get to that in just a minute. So aero-wise, we obviously have a completely different front fascia, and you can see on the front end, although it looks aggressive from a distance, the big air openings on both the driver and passenger side, they're actually really minimal. They're just off to the side, and it's just really fake plastic behind there for a majority of it.
Yeah.
They did do some different aero on the lower radiator there, and the cross member is slightly repositioned across the middle of the grille there. And if you come around to the side, we do have that completely different side fender compared to any other F-Type. Just backing up a second, we obviously have some different heat reduction vents, right? Some heat extractors out of the hood. And just seeing the aero, like the aerodynamics that went into the F-Type is pretty cool looking back at like the 2017 brochure. And
yeah,
by the way, the SVR was from 2017 to 2020, and then it just turned into the R from 20 until current day 24, where they stopped making the F-Type altogether. And what I will say before we continue on the differences here is the current day R does have a lot of the items that the SVR had during the SVR run. So we have that 3-year run of the SVR, which is pretty darn cool. So that side vent, that side fender, Austin, it's all about like drag reduction.
Yep.
That's what like all the aerodynamics is about, is drag reduction. And there's something I'm going to share with you that I bet you didn't know, Austin, as well as the audience here in just a second, as we're working our way towards the back of the car. But I got to back up. Like that front fender, it's so cool.
It is very cool.
Look at it from the side and like in the wheel well, there's just slotted aero for the air to go in there and sweep down the body line. Again, it's all about like drag reduction. It's about aerodynamics to get this 575 horsepower behemoth up to 200 miles an hour. But you get that back to the back and you have that fixed carbon fiber wing, right?
What a beautiful piece. So it really sets it apart.
I learned this to get to 200 miles an hour. You know what actually has to happen?
What?
You actually have to hold down the spoiler button to go into, I think it's VMAX mode, so that spoiler actually stays in the fixed low position.
Oh, interesting.
If it goes up, you actually get additional downforce and you get some additional aerodynamics for more like track and handling. Yeah. But if you're in straight line performance, you want that wing to stay low.
Interesting.
And as
very
we
cool.
go to the back of the F-Type, that's when things are also different. You'll see a similarity to a new F-Type where that rear diffuser is pretty much the same as a new F-Type.
It is, yes.
However,
split in the middle and the super aggressive look. I love the
It looks really good, right? Which is a dramatic difference from the R of the
Very dramatic, yeah. It looks very good.
but we also have the exhaust, which is different, and this was one of the weight-saving items, titanium exhaust, but this isn't the whole exhaust. We'll talk more about this in a minute when Austin takes over with our next part of the journey here. It's not full titanium exhaust. It's really just like the tips or the end portion of the exhaust that's titanium. There are some other differences, so stand by for that. So we have weight savings, we have aero, we have the 25 horsepower increase, but there's not like a ton of stuff, right? We really need to get to the underside to talk about what's up.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and throw this on our 4-post lift like we have done with previous F-types. Let's bring this thing up in the air and let's start taking off panels. And when we talk about panels, there's one panel that covers the rear differential here on the F-type. There is one panel that covers kind of the center transmission and transfer case of the F-type, or just before the transfer case. And then there is another panel in front of that panel that interlocks with the panel that covers the transmission, and just in front of the transfer case that covers the bottom of the 575 horsepower 5-liter V8 that is under the hood of this F-type SVR. And when we have all of those off, we can see pretty much everything on the underside of this F-type. There's just those 3 main panels that cover up all of the goods.
Austin, that's a great explanation and summary. Just taking it a step further, going back in time to when we had the 2015 and the 2017 up on the lift, and now comparing the all-wheel drive R and the rear-wheel drive R to the current day SVR, let's just talk about some of those differences, right? Going back to the exhaust, like I mentioned before, on the previous versions of the R, like you have the huge suitcase muffler. Where on the SVR, you have the singular mufflers on each side that are obviously poking out those titanium tips, right? From there forward, that exhaust essentially looks identical. But before we get too carried away, let's not forget to mention that we also have a larger tire on the SVR in the rear.
Yes, we do.
If my memory is correct, the SVR has a 305, whereas the Rs have a 295. And also, going off of memory here, and I'll take the challenge down in the comments below, we go from an 8.5-inch wheel to a 9-inch wheel on the SVR. Those wheels, that is another weight savings, which adds up to about, I think it's right around 30 pounds.
Yeah, I think it's about 8 to 9 pounds per wheel.
And also the exhaust is about 30 pounds. The other weight saving, which is not on the SVR in today's video, is the carbon ceramic brakes, which that again would be about a 30-pound savings.
This one is also not equipped with the carbon fiber roof, mirrors, side skirts, front valance, or the rear diffuser, and all of those add up to a very minimal weight savings, if I remember
They
right.
absolutely do, but they do look cool.
They look very cool.
Right? So there is the weight savings, but what's interesting, if you have the R from 2015 rear-wheel drive, it still weighed less than the SVR, which there are some videos out there of R15 racing an SVR. Our previous friend over at what is it, Skirt Garage, I believe, had a video.
Yes, he did.
And at a roll, right, not a launch, but at a roll, that R will still pull on an SVR because it's lighter, right? That 25 horsepower isn't sufficient enough to make up that weight difference. However, if you're comparing the SVR to the R rear-wheel drive, now you're talking about up to a 300-pound weight savings, which is pretty substantial. And again, that 25 horsepower increase.
And potentially a little bit more reliability as well, because you don't have another drive axle, transfer case, and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely good points. Going back to the back end here, before we get too carried away and make our way to the front in the SVR. So the rear steering knuckles are supposed to be aluminum and a little lighter weight in the SVR. But I'm going to be honest, with just a slight bit of confusion here. When I was reading about this, I was wondering if that was because, or it's only in carbon ceramic packaged cars, that those steering knuckles in the rear are different. Exact same steering knuckles in the front, they're aluminum, all trim levels, all F-types, but in the rear, the steering knuckles are supposed to be slightly different, about a pound weight savings. On that same topic, Austin, the cross member across the passenger side to driver side.
Much larger.
Huge, right?
Yeah,
It's
much
substantial.
larger.
I would say almost triple the size.
Yep.
And that is for like lateral G's essentially is what I read.
Yeah.
It stiffens everything up. You throw the wider tires on there. You have this larger cross member.
However, right in front of that, just like we saw on our 15R, we are noticing some rust on a car that's never seen winter on this little bar that sits right in front of that additional support bar.
And if my memory is correct, everyone always complained this is when Tata Motors, the Chinese massive automotive ownership group that took over ownership of the Jaguar Land Rover brand, the joke is that's Chinese steel and that's why it rusted, right?
I guess so. Random that they put it in only that one spot.
Austin, we do have some important stuff to share in just a moment, and we'll get there. We promise you we will.
We will.
But what before we get there, I think it's important to just continue to work our way forward. That exhaust system is essentially exactly the same after you get to the mufflers until you get up to the PDU, right? The power distribution unit, also known as a transfer case essentially, because the SVR is all-wheel drive. They claim that there's some different software in there, but boy, it sure looks identical to that R all-wheel drive we had up on the lift. And what I can tell you is it's interesting that you have the same aero. But wait a second, Austin. You know what we forgot to mention?
What?
We forgot to mention the most important thing that brings this SVR up to 200 miles an hour, and that is the aero on the bottom side rear that's connected to that rear diffuser that helps, again, with that drag, right?
Yeah, it kind of flows air out of that rear diffuser the way that this plastic shroud kind of shoves into the back and lets air go right out of the back of the diffuser as it skims along the bottom of the F-type.
You're correct, and not only what exactly Austin just said, but there's also some plastic pieces that tunnel some cool air to that rear differential to keep that cool, and that'll be a talking point in a future video on that buyer's guide, but we'll get there next time. Let's stick to the point here. Going back up to that ZF 8-speed and buy that transfer case, not a whole lot's different, I'm gonna be honest.
I would agree, yeah, there's not a whole lot that looks different at all compared to that 2017 R all-wheel drive. The entire package up front looks very similar. It really does.
And even going forward, we have the exact same tray underneath with the exact same like air inlets, which is really cool. The only difference I saw, which I can't remember certain, is there's a couple scoops here and there that might be for like the bottom of the oil pan or something goofy along those lines. But it's like the same scoops for the brake cooling.
Yep.
A lot of very similar cars. So the point in saying that and making this clear is like the R is a fantastic car.
It is.
Let's not lose sight of that. This is just like the limited production, the SVO team putting everything they had at it, including the interior, but we're more focused on the exterior here and the underbellies, which a lot of people don't get to see.
So I think what you're saying here is if you are buying the SVR or you need the SVR for performance, you should just stick with the R. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying the R is a fantastic car. The SVR is the limited trim that's kind of fun for some people to own.
It is. It's super, super cool.
Obviously some cosmetic differences that can stand out from the crowd, and that's really cool. Obviously there's some interior differences with that quilted leather. But Austin, you know what? Let's talk about the real fun stuff that we uncovered that we'll talk about more in future videos, not only coming up with the, or talking about what the dealer has to say, but also that buyer's guide that's coming up. We found a lot of seepage.
There's a lot of seepage on this thing, way more than we found on your 2015 R, but it also has like 10, 15,000 more miles than your 15R had on it.
It was about the same when I sold it, but yeah, you're exactly right in the 40,000 mile range.
Yeah, so I'm interested in seeing what this aftermarket warranty that we have on this Jag covers. I guess we'll have to find out and see.
We're not even going to go into details because we're going to save that for the buyer's guide, but we found at least 4 different items on the SVR that is seeping. And ladies and gentlemen, that essentially wraps up the video today on Performance on Wheels, talking about the differences on the SVR versus the R, and also just sharing what is one of the best looking cars on the road with you guys.
I will have to agree with that.